Let's get going with the latest edition of the Public Square from the American Policy Roundtable. Great to have you listening. Thanks for joining us each week at this time. And we have other programs available to you on radio and online as well, thepublicsquare.com. Hey, Dave Zanotti is here. Melanie Elsie, Jeff Sanders, Alan C. Duncan, our producer, and I'm Wayne Shepard. Dave, where are we going this week?
Wayne, we do have other programs available. We have a program that's available that we talk about all the time that's more available from you than from us, but we still feel it's part in the family called First Person with Wayne Shepard.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Right. Funny you should mention that. I placed a call to Thailand this morning. I was in the studio at 6 a.m. because it was 6 p.m. for him, and I wanted to talk to a gentleman in Thailand. So we got that done early this morning.
Wow. And your program's, last time I checked, it was like 500 stations?
Yeah, about 550, I think now. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and growing. Wonderful half-hour program, interview program, outstanding. Now, granted, Wayne, you're no Larry King.
No,
I think you're a little
thankfully.
better. I think you're a little better, but I'm biased. I admit it. All right, but this is a wonderful program, and it's been around for how many years now?
Started in 2010, so 14 years. 15 years now, coming up on 15.
We started together in this format of the Public Square. You and I started in 2007 on this particular front. And, of course, we have other products, too. We have a 2-minute broadcast. We have a 5-minute weekend broadcast. We have an hour-long broadcast. We have daily 30-minute broadcasts. And we have Kids on the Square now. So all of these things are growing. And all of them are listener-supported. In case you're thinking, well, man, that's a lot of growth and that's a lot of stations. And we're also on a regular basis with Your Morning Show with Michael Del Giorno on the Premier Radio Network and iHeart, which is wonderful. People thinking, well, wow, you guys must have really hit into some money, right? I mean, wow, you must have giant corporate sponsorships. You got to be killing it on YouTube.
You didn't tell me about that if you did.
Yeah. It's the same way we started. We started with one radio station and one reel-to-reel recorder and one microphone. And all of this growth has happened by the grace of God and by listener support.
Wow.
It's remarkable. It's because people hear a different message here across all of these different programs, and they want to be a part of it. And I'm appreciative.
When you say listener supported, that's more than financial. It's also prayer, of course. But it's more than that. It's passing the word along to other people. Hey, have you heard about the Public Square?
You were talking about that on the show last week. That is so important. In fact, that's actually how we get to today's broadcast. And today's broadcast is dedicated to all the people in Illinois who wish they were a part of Indiana.
Okay. So that's everybody south of I-80, basically, right?
That's what we're talking about.
Are you fomenting a secession movement?
Oh, they're already past it. They've already voted, Jeff. There are counties in Illinois that have voted to secede from the state. Yes. And there are members of the Indiana legislature that are saying, we'll take them. So this is for real now. I had lunch last week with a pastor, a dear gentleman, very strong leader in the faith, and he's from Southern Illinois, from the western southern part of Illinois. And we got to talking, and he said, yeah, that's one county over from me. I said, those people are heroes. He said, let me tell you something. Those people listen to you on the radio. I said, yeah, I know. They're some of the greatest stations that we've ever had in that area, particularly WBNH. And I said, these are some of the greatest people in the country. And they all feel like they're exiled from America because Illinois is one of the most liberal states in the Union, but the people are not all liberal.
Very similar to Oregon. Eastern Oregon wants to join Idaho, and many in Northern California want to secede from Southern California. So it's happening in other places too.
Is there anything legal that would prevent that?
No, it can be done. It's just got to be approved. Congress has to approve it.
Oh, okay.
But the states have to approve it and Congress has to approve it. So today's broadcast is brought to you by the letter I for Illinois and for all the good friends of Illinois who wish they weren't.
Now, since you don't live here, why don't you pronounce it Illinois?
Because you're my friend, and I want you to stay my friend.
Okay, thank you.
But I will forever hold the Cubs' victory against the Cleveland Indians against you until we get to eternity.
Wow, that's going to last a long time.
I know. The one thing I have to let go at the gate is the fact that of the two teams that couldn't win the World Series forever, they had to meet each other and somebody had to lose.
Well, Dave, to that point, my son Caleb was playing Little League Baseball for the first time in his life this year, and they use team names from real major league teams. And I was telling Wayne, he's on the Cubs, so I've got to get over that. As a Cleveland fan, I got to get over it.
I knew I liked that
The
boy.
boy is not getting dinner any longer the whole season.
Yeah.
You're out of here.
Yeah, but you guys have Wrigley Field. It's a great historic stadium. So the architecture buff in me appreciates the brick wall with the ivy. So I can go there.
Yep, and the Ivy's coming into its own right now. So
all of this is leading somewhere. And it's not the fact that Melanie Elsey did play collegiate softball. We're not talking about that. All of this leads somewhere. And it leads to a map. So here's what we did this morning. I asked everybody on our team, and just going to be this is a little bit embarrassing because, we're like supposed to be the experts, 45 years in the business, and we don't know everything. We don't know a lot. We don't know more than we think we do know. So I just said, okay, quick pop quiz. How many states did Kamala Harris win in the 2024 election? And everybody went, and everyone paused, just like I did when the question came to me at 4 o'clock in the morning. And I sat up and I said, what?
Who was asking you that question at 4 o'clock in the morning?
I don't know
God.
how many states she won. So I had to get on my phone and look, and I popped up a map from 270 to win, which nobody looks at in an off election year, right? So I looked at it and I went, she won 19 states and Donald Trump won 31.
Oh, I thought it was 18 plus DC.
I was counting 18 in my head.
No, it's 19 plus DC makes it 20. But if you just search engine that information, the little spiel that comes up on artificial intelligence first is wrong. I actually took a picture of the AI being incorrect, saying that she only won 15 states.
Oh, wow.
So nobody, not even AI, knows how many she won. And you know why that is? It dawned on me. It's because we look at the electoral map and all we see is electoral college votes. Mm-hmm. We never stop and ask how many states went red or blue or Trump or Harris or whatever. Whatever. Bush, Gore. How many states? And I sat and I looked at that map and I said, wait a second. We are missing a very significant reality here. And then I had lunch with that pastor from Illinois. And it dawned on me, there is an entire America going on that politically speaking, almost no one's looking at. But it's where all the working, all the praying, all the playing, all the taxing, all the effort gets done. It gets done in the states. So let's look at the map and let's start a conversation, which is completely unscripted in this regard. And let's start with, where do blue votes and where do red votes come from? Now, I'm asking it that way because that's how the Electoral College ends up being, one or the other. However, I want to make it very clear that that's not political reality in America. And this is one of the reasons why we're so deceived. Everybody see that map? You see blue and red, right? There it is. 19 plus the district, and then you've got the reds. All right. And by the way, if you're not careful, you'll miss Hawaii because it looks like a little Rorschach block. The way that the 270 map, they can't get it far enough west to make it relevant, so they put it underneath New Mexico, which you're not expecting Hawaii to be there, so you can walk right past it.
Boy, it drifted.
Well, that's hilarious because that's the 19th state that I missed.
Okay.
When I was
Yeah.
See, that's not a smudge on your screen. That's Hawaii.
No.
Okay?
Apparently, a strong wind blew it there. Yeah.
So let's take a look at this map, and you'll notice there is no white. There's no, if it's red, white, and blue, if it'd be red for Republicans and blue for Democrats, white would be independents. Now, because we don't have a presidential election that's constructed with a valid, viable, independent candidate in recent history, we have to go way back to have that. And then not that far back. We got to go back at least to Ross Perot to get a viable independent candidate that actually, and then you have to go back to Wallace before you get to candidates that actually won states. It doesn't happen very often. So we tend to believe when you look at a map, the only people in America that are out there are Republicans or Democrats. That is the first fundamental and perhaps fatal flaw in our understanding. In many states, more than 50% of the people who vote in a presidential election are not aligned with either political party. So to think that we live in a two-party system it's only true on paper. It's only true on paper. In practice, we are anything but. And for those that think that America was designed to be a two-party system, including many, many conservatives who hold Abraham Lincoln in the highest esteem, we have to remember Lincoln was a third-party candidate in a four-party race. So he was the disruptive technology.
And is it trending towards maybe some white on the map at some point?
Well, it might be, and it might start in Illinois. It might start in a state like Illinois, where half the state geographically feels captive to Chicagoland. How many counties Chicagoland is in? 11? Is it 11 counties?
Yeah, in the large metropolitan area, sure. Yeah. And then you've got Northwest Indiana thrown in there too. So,
yeah. So you've got a dominance of a major metropolitan area that controls by population the state legislature and makes the people who live there who disagree with the Democrat progressive regime that emanates from Chicago like they're non-citizens. So let's start there.
Yeah, let's start there. We'll take our break now so we can get after it here about this two-party system that sort of dominates all those headlines. So we'll get after it on the Public Square. Here's you. Stay with us now.
Spreading the light of liberty across the land. Now back to the Public Square.
Back with you in the Public Square now. Have you thought up a title for this conversation yet today, Dave?
Beats me. We hope we get there by segment 5.
That's a really long title. That's a long title, but we'll go with it. Beats me. But I hope we get there. All right.
Okay. All right. So looking at the map, just look at it and let's just pretend we're, like it's a coloring book map. What do you all see? What's your first response when you look at the map? What is it that you see?
I see the western edge of our country blue and the northeast corner of the country blue and a small handful in between. 5 states in between.
So you see more red than blue?
Overwhelmingly more red than blue, yeah.
I also see the small blue areas in the middle of the country are not nearly as populated as some of the other states, but they swung blue because of the metropolitan areas there.
So there's a lot of red and a little blue, right?
Mm-hmm.
If we're just counting like space on the map, there's a lot of red and a little blue. Of course, that doesn't mean that's where the people live. And that's always been the challenging point, going back to the construction of the country in the Constitutional Convention. How do we deal with large states versus small, large regions versus small, large cities versus smalls, and those competing interests, which can very quickly, as the framers discussed, turn into factions, which pit one point of the country against the other. Now, they thought they had it figured out and that they could find a way of balancing. They were partially right and partially wrong because we still ended up in a civil war. So the formula alone of balance of power isn't sufficient if some people are just determined that they're going to have a war. So process doesn't fix hearts and minds. Process can help dramatically. But as a balancing point can help, but the process alone isn't perfect. So you got a lot of states up there in the Northeast, right? And what's kind of interesting is you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Before you get to New York, you've got a dozen states in a little bitty part of the geography. There's a lot of people that live up there. There's a lot of people that live up there. Now, They don't make up all combined as many electoral votes, I don't think. 10, 24, 34. Yeah, they barely make up as many states, maybe a few more than California. So that whole segment would have about the same population, give or take, as California. So you got 10 states to one state. Whoa, that's interesting. So California is a very powerful state. So what you've got is you've got a very liberal northeastern coastline. You've got a very liberal left coastline, all right, on the west with California and Oregon and Washington. And then you got dots on the map in between. Anybody see anything changing up in the Northeast? I mean, do you think there's a possibility of the Northeast ceasing to be the progressive headquarters and tech headquarters? And I mean, anybody see blue going to red or white, or what do you see, Jeff?
One or two areas. So I heard in the last election that New Jersey came precariously close to actually being won by Donald Trump. I think Trump lost New Jersey by maybe a 1 percentage point, something very, very razor thin. And then in New York State, people who support Trump continued to win seats in Long Island, and then the rest of the state, except for New York City and Albany and Buffalo. Those are the three blue areas, if you want to call it that. So it looks like some of these areas may be trending towards more conservative candidates soon.
Well, I'm glad that you brought that up just that way. I think I also may have sent around an article, and I thought I'd get some interesting comments on this because we are very well aware of the Council of Foreign Relations, right? Everybody kind of knows that. That's like cast a shudder down your chill down your spine.
Cue the scary music.
CFR, and their history, and here we go with conspiracy. I sent an article around on their analysis of the presidential election based on electoral votes in states, and I purposely used them as a reference point because I want to let people know that we read across the whole spectrum, that we just don't go to sites that are considered red sites or conservative sites or Republican sites or independent sites. We do try to read across the spectrum. Their math was correct, and they rightly pointed out that if you go back to the last two presidential elections, if you go back to, in fact, you can go back to the three, go back to 16. Donald Trump won by a composite of about 100,000 votes spread across 3 states, maybe 5. Now, wait a minute, that's like he was winning a state with 10,000 votes, 20,000 votes. That's a teeny, tiny number. Well, in 2020, those 5 states all flipped and went to Biden. And they didn't go there by landslide majorities. The only one that flipped substantially was Georgia. It flipped exclusively in the 5 counties where Stacey Abrams spent hundreds of millions of dollars to recruit and register and secure votes through the COVID mechanisms of what happened. So it wasn't coincidental, it was strategic, and it was processed. I'm not suggesting it was illegal. It really did happen. But Joe Biden won by a handful of votes in a handful of states. Now you come up to Donald Trump's second victory, and those states flip again by very close numbers. Bigger numbers than they flipped in 16, but still not huge numbers. The point is, these things can flip back and forth, and this map can look completely different. You could end up with 7 more states on this map that are blue with less than 1 million votes, far less. Now, if you count the total numbers of votes being cast, 75 million for Trump, 73 million for Harris, you're talking 1 million votes out of 158 million cast. That's a really small percentage. The point being is this map, when it comes to the presidency, is like skating on ice. I mean, you can fall down a lot. You got to be really proficient to navigate this map, or you're going to spend a lot of time falling down. This is very slippery stuff. But we tend to think that reality is constructed in our country based on the outcome of the presidential map and the Electoral College. We never look at the razor-thin margins. You realize that George W. Bush became president on a margin of 537 votes in one state.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you got to go a long way from there to get the landslide.
And that even was litigated up to the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
But the whole way.
Right.
So, and people can call elections whatever they want to call them. We're not in the business of trying to win presidential elections, so we don't care what they call them. If you look at the numbers, it's just simple math and common sense to say these things are really tight. They are constantly tight, and they go back and forth. They have been going back and forth for quite a while. So that's the presidential maps. And here's the reason why. You can forget all the other stuff. Forget it all. Presidential elections are like student council elections. They've become popularity contests. And if your candidate comes out of central casting with more popularity than their candidate and runs a near-perfect campaign, they've got a darn good shot of beating anybody, particularly if the person on the other side of the aisle steps in a few traps and runs a bad campaign. You never know coming out of the block what's going to happen here. You just never know. But what about this map? You know, Wayne, did the whole world of Illinois change dramatically when Biden was president versus when Trump became president? Did everything change?
No.
Nuh-uh. Did it?
No. A lot more changed when the governor went his way, but that's another story altogether. So,
but that's exactly the point. In the state of Illinois, what's more important, who the president is or who the governor is?
Yep, I believe it's the governor.
Let me ask you, Melanie, you've been at this for a lifetime. Is there any state in the union where who the president is more important than who the governor is in reality?
No, not one.
So why is that? Why is that?
I think a part of it is a perception that's created by the media. The whole flip side to the campaign coin is what's covered and how it's covered with the media in general. You know, Dave, what I think is super cool, interesting cool, is that in the Kentucky Derby, the results that were just rendered just a few days ago, the final head-to-head race was between horses named Sovereignty and Journalism, and Sovereignty won. Isn't that interesting? I just think that's kind of a cool data point.
So noted, yes.
And there was plenty of mud to go around. Yeah. So,
yes, there was.
A lot of mud flying, yeah.
And a lot of mud flying. So the point is, we've already come to a very significant departure report in regards to reality in American politics. Governors are more important than presidents. In regards to what actually happens in a state, state government is more important than the federal government. When you look at the map, what does the map tell you? When you look at that map, what does it tell you? The fact is, those blue states are not going to become red states because Donald Trump won the election. They might become more blue than they were before. The power of how people choose to govern themselves in the states is much, much more significant. Now remember, we're saying this after a Republican has won the presidency and appears to be dominating the political landscape right now. I don't care what name you put at the top of that ticket. What's happening in those states is still more important.
All right. The map will continue to tell the tale as we continue on the Public Square today, here and always online. You can listen at thepublicsquare.com and with our smartphone app as well, free in your app store. Let's continue on the Public Square. Now, during the break, we learned that Melanie doesn't like pop quizzes. And Dave, you're going to pop a question right now. Melanie is shaking in her boots, but go ahead.
I have to spend a lot of time every week to try to get the drop on Melanie, I'll tell you. Okay. So let's take a look at some of these blue states. And let's ask ourselves the question. Illinois is not exclusive in this idea that a lot of people feel held captive by a geographical concentration of left-wing voters. And then what follows behind that are left-wing lawmakers in the legislature and Congress and in state offices. Let's go to the state of New York. Okay, the state of New York, pretty big deal. I mean, it still has some waterfront property on it, and quite a few places, both north and south. State of New York, there's two New Yorks, aren't there? There's two Illinois, there's two states of New York. Mm-hmm. There's New York City, and there's everybody else, right? Mm-hmm. A very dear friend of ours, Michael Del Giorno from your morning show, loves Syracuse, New York. He was raised in Syracuse, New York, part of his childhood, and he spent in Syracuse. He goes back every year to watch Syracuse football games. Yeah, he loves, and you know what? The people in Syracuse, they don't feel all that hot about politics in the state of New York. Wayne, I see you smiling.
Yeah, you're telling our tale here in Illinois as well. Before you go any further, though, I noticed that both New York and Illinois at 270towin.com has both of those states leaning.
Leaning, I guess maybe that's, I'm not exactly sure what they're leaning toward.
Well, I wonder if that isn't because of this dichotomy that we're talking about.
And the geography right now, well, that's exactly the point. So why is it that New York and Illinois are so divided philosophically and geographically, but they're monolithically blue? Their legislature's blue. Their governors are blue. I mean, the answer is so obvious, forgive me. It's Chicago and New York City.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So why is it that power for the left is concentrated in major urban centers and suburban centers? Understand, don't think I just played a race card here. Urban and suburban metropolitan areas, big cities. They call them on the left post-industrial big cities.
Okay.
All right. In other words, they're not all the steelmaking towns that they used to be, or that kind of stuff. All right. Now, there's still a lot of business and industry going on, obviously, in those big areas. But this is not necessarily because these are the big cities and these are the labor unions and that's where all the workers are. Nope, that's not the case. So what is it about New York and Chicago that made everybody go left?
Something I've been wondering about for a long time.
It is a little mind-boggling. And when I look at the map of New York in the presidential results, the counties colored are predominantly red. So I can understand why they would have a left-leaning governor. I don't understand why they would have a majority blue in the state legislature when you have the vast majority of counties that appear to lean red. That part is a question mark in my mind. I don't understand it.
Yeah, well, and Dave, I think one of the answers to your question is a lot of times these big cities have big universities in there. There's a big college presence, and the left has been dominating academia for quite some time. So I think that's part of it.
People should be voting.
Media centers.
People should be voting in their residents, their permanent residents in the state from which they come. So not necessarily all of them. I mean, there was an effort several years ago in Secretary of State's offices, including Ohio, where they were trying to get the college voters to vote twice at the presidential level, where you're attending a university and then back home. So they've corrected some of that with the data systems, but I think it still happens.
But Alan, I think you're referring more to the intellectual
yes.
part of what the universities are representing, as opposed to actual voters at the university, right?
Right. Yeah. It's a hub of thought. You have the people that work at the university. You have local students that go to the university. You have, to Wayne's point, you have just a hub of thought that comes out from them.
You have hospitals there. You have research centers, and you have NPR stations. Mm-hmm. In those urban centers, in those universities as well, that emanate out in political thought, and that is all left wing. And I don't care how much their CEO says they shoot straight down the middle. I don't know what middle she's looking at. All right, so you've got those universities are a big factor. Now, I want to go ahead and I don't want to let this point hang too long, because I know that there are people that listen to us critically and they're already typing, saying you're already racist. No. If you look at those large urban centers, of course, what you're saying is large urban centers, you're talking about black people, poor black people live in the cities on welfare. You're saying they're the ones that are controlling the vote. That's what we'll be accused of. And in some cases, conservatives make claims like that, and they make an argument so poorly that they fall right into that trap. But the reality is, and I was just listening to some stuff from the American Enterprise Institute the other day from some Democrat strategists who basically were very, very open and honest in saying that the biggest left-wing contingent in the urban centers and in the Democrat Party today are white, college-educated voters. We are not talking about people of color on welfare. This is the urban center, the intellectual centers, and the suburban rings around the inner centers. That's where the vote count is, and that's what the left is saying out loud.
Well, and that this past election that we're even talking about is illustrative of that. I mean, you look at the right winning historic numbers of minority votes, in a surprising way.
What's interesting to me is, and I've never understood this, so much of the left and leftist voters emanate from very, very affluent areas of the country. For example, if you look at right outside of Washington, D.C., whether it's Arlington and Alexandria, Virginia, or it's Montgomery County, Maryland, or Howard County, Maryland, those have some of the highest per capita incomes in the entire United States. We're talking about people with 2 or 3 college degrees and are making, $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 a year, and they vote left wing.
Well, and then here's what the research shows, Jeff.
I just scratch my head and say, why?
Well, Northern Virginia and Maryland are the suburbs of the District of Columbia.
Yeah.
And those are some of the wealthiest, most educated people who are committed at the highest level to the sustaining size of the United States government because their income is dependent upon the administrative state. Now, that doesn't make them wicked or evil people. I'm not suggesting that. They have either government jobs or jobs that are directly related to the government, and those are good-paying jobs, and they're not about to vote for a wrecking ball to come in and start doging the federal government because they make a good living off the federal government just the way it's put together. Thank you very much.
But a wrecking ball is coming, and they vote for inertia so that $37 trillion will just continue to grow, and we need to tax people more often. I just cannot figure it out.
In some ways, I think the immigration issue has blown a hole wide. That wall has been blown wide open because I've seen many media coverages of local inner city council meetings where minority folks are complaining because all of the resources that are going into the illegal immigration pool of serving people, and their communities are being left out. Even if you talk about the Hispanic community in southern Texas, some of those counties voted overwhelmingly for the policies that would cut off the problem of illegal immigration.
Let's pause again to take another break on the Public Square. If you're new to our broadcast, welcome, first of all. Second of all, we'd love for you to check us out online if you'd like. We have a couple of websites, aproundtable.org and, of course, thepublicsquare.com. More to come. So this conversation got going on the Public Square today, looking at the website 270 to Win and drawing some conclusions from it. And Dave, you're leading this discussion. Where do you want to go next?
Well, it's an inverted reality because 270 to Win exists for people to view the elections in light of presidential elections in the Electoral College. But when you get done with it, when you first log on, what you see is just this coloring book map, and it's got 2 colors. And it's, each of the states are colored in based on how they voted for the presidential election. And when you look at it, it tells an entire story of America that by and large has very little to do with the presidency. but much more to do with how we live our daily lives. Now, where we're going with this, and we'll keep going here, we're not afraid to make the point and bury the lead. We're going to say it numbers of times. What we're talking about here is the difference between a locked down, presidential only mindset and the reality that in the blue states, now that Donald Trump's president, not a whole lot's changed, nor will it change, because the majority of what happens in state government as it regards the living and the lifestyles of the people there happens from the state level down. That's reality. And when you look at these maps, I just ask you to look at the blue states, everybody. You got the East Coast states and you've got New York. Anybody think New York's going to flip and suddenly become conservative? And not just the 20. Now remember, the 28 electoral votes represent the numbers of House and Senate seats that they have. Everybody's got 2, plus their House. You think that we're going to suddenly see the New York delegation turn red while the state stays blue? I mean, what are the odds of that happening? How about Illinois? Wayne, you think you see a massive flip on the horizon?
No.
Well, here's my question. How far off is the horizon? Because we talk a lot about population numbers on this broadcast. What does this map look like in 25 years? What does it look like in 30 years? What does it look like in 50 years? You can look at some of the states that are trending a little more up in their population numbers. Texas is one of them. And you can look at other states that are trending down in their population numbers. And a lot of those are some of these affluent blue ones. So I just wonder what this map is going to look like in 25 years, population-wise.
If you had asked me in 1980, 1984, and 1988, what are the odds that California would become a one-party Democrat state, I would have said, you're out of your mind. California was a reliable Republican state for generations, and yet we see what has happened. So if you say, New York State, it'll never turn conservative or whatever, you don't know.
But if you have a state that doesn't require voter ID, that doesn't require you to confirm that you're a U.S. citizen, doesn't allow you to even question the results of individual votes that are cast, you're going to have a more reliable progressive state. That's just going to be the product of A plus B plus C equals D.
Okay, and Melanie, let me ask you, all those things that you just described, are those federal laws or state laws that would make those things a reality?
Initially, I would say federal laws, because federal laws, beginning with HAVA, or maybe even prior to HAVA, the Help America Vote Act, there were some strange requirements in HAVA that allowed sort of the leakage of good policy at the state level. States can determine how their votes are cast, and California has predominantly erred on those issues. But there are federal parameters that can be set as well, and they have been.
Well, you did a good job there. You covered all angles on that one, Senator. I appreciate that response. But I think the second answer to this is we're just describing now some of the biggest legal fights that are coming nobody's talking about.
Yep.
Because there are states who have enough power in a single party majority, like those West Coast states, who could very easily begin to open elections to people that they term citizens as in their terminology, and then dare someone to stop them, and now we're in court. And I think that is inevitable. I think if Eric Holder and others have their way, that battle is coming. It's just a matter of time and significance and lining it up, but it's coming. So I think that is going to be an interesting debate. And we might even end up in a situation where we have a two-tiered sense of voting. If the state says you're a citizen and the feds say, no, you're not, the Fed ruling would only apply to federal elections, and the states could do whatever they want to do. So, I mean, this is something that never gets talked about.
But back to Alan's point about the population numbers, I see in 25 years more conservative voters because the conservatives are bearing children. And I'm, tapped into the home education community, and those families are having many children. So those children are a generation away of becoming registered voters. Whereas the flip side, the more progressive movement and those individuals are not willing to have children. And I understand that's a generalized statement. Then maybe it's not fair.
Oh, but I knew the pro-natalist in you would have to come out sooner or later. I know this group of people. I read what people say about you all.
I just think the more babies, the better.
Amen to that.
But hang on a second. In addition to that, we also have to talk about the census. Alan, you said how things look 10 years from now. I'll just ask you how they're going to look 5 years from now. Because in the last census, there was a net shift of, I think it may have been 6 electoral college votes and congressional seats that went to red states from blue states. Now, the next census looks to be even more significant. So if you think about that within 5 years from now, there are another 6 or 8 more votes that move down. That would be a total of 12 to 14 electoral college votes that moved from blue states into red states, which is the equivalent of basically Colorado being replaced, so to speak. All right. I mean, and maybe Colorado and Wyoming and New Mexico both being replaced. So that's, again, the brilliance of the founders who put the system in place where people live and where they vote is where they get counted.
Yeah, and the population's been shifting. Illinois is losing residents. California, people are moving to Arizona and Texas out of California, and that has to have an effect eventually on it, doesn't it?
I talked to a pastor in Tennessee recently, and he said to me that they're a growing church, and they said that there are 2 C's that dominate their growth in Middle Tennessee in regards to their congregation. I thought, okay, I'm going to get these 2 giant spiritual principles. He says, California and Chicago.
Yeah, there you go. I know.
So the red states are becoming redder?
Yes, and the blue states are losing electoral college votes and congressional seats. And I think that next census 5 years from now, it only stands to be all the more because there's no way that the states that people are fleeing can catch up policy-wise for results. So this might actually be, Alan, when you said let's project that out 5 years, well, then let's project it out 15 years and 25 years because we're based on the census. No, there's a significant challenge there. Now, that brings us to the question of immigration. In regards to the idea that there are people who have said, I'm repeating this, it's been repeated thousands of times, so I'm not inventing it, nor am I validating it. I'm stating it as the theory that one of the reasons that the Republicans did not, to this date, deal on solving the immigration problem was because it served their donor base well enough to have inexpensive labor in this country. And that's the allegation. On the other side, the Democrat criticism is that people really believe in the Democrat Party, that people coming to this country illegally were far more likely to eventually vote as Democrats. So get them here, then we'll get them legalized, then we'll have a whole new voter base that the other guys can't compete with. Thus the deadlock on immigration. But there's another side to that story, Wayne. We've got to talk about it.
Okay, and we will in a moment. A few of you have to leave us at this time, but there's always the website where you can catch the entire program from beginning to end, and that website is thepublicsquare.com. You can do the same thing with our smartphone app as well. And again, thanks for your support of this program, which has you as the backers of what we're doing here, so we appreciate that.
We'll be right back for more on the Public Square.
Have you listened to the Kids on the Square episodes, Passing Time and the New Frontier, featuring the Lewis and Clark expedition? Join us for discoveries.
Well, these marks in the dirt, they make a pattern. Must be tracks of some kind, but surely not. Those scratches are too large. Maybe a herd of deer?
No, the imprint isn't right. Deer are much lighter on their feet. This track is too deep. I don't think the stories are false. That rock isn't a rock. It's a grizzly bear.
Adventures.
Time to be brave, cowboy. Nothing can stop us.
Oh, come on. Not again.
Game over.
And laughs.
A prairie dog?
Oh, look at him run. Quite a pleasing little animal, is it not?
I suppose so, Mr. President.
Well, we have our update on the expedition now. Oh, look, he's sniffing my desk.
Kids on the Square aims to bless, encourage, and educate the next generation of American children. So what are you waiting for? Grab a friend, share this episode with your family, and join us today at
Kids on the Square.
Listen to episodes and discover more today at kidsonthesquare.com.
Dave Zanotti says he's having fun here today, so let's keep going. By all means, we want you to have fun on this program, Dave. So,
I think my nerd credentials are coming out in regards to this, but I think, Wayne, one of the things that I have learned in 45 years of service here is how much bigger the gap between Washington, D.C. and the tower media sources, the big conglomerate media sources, is how far the distance is from where those people live and where the people in Illinois live.
And it's not getting narrower, is it?
No, it's not. There's a group of elites, and they're not. That doesn't make them bad. I mean, there are not many people that do public policy for a living, and we all do that. So maybe we're the elites. I'm not trying to throw mud at people or throw names. It's just there is a cultural elitism about our form of civil government that says we know what's going on, and all the rest of you, your job is just kind of pay for it and stay out of jail. Okay, it's what you're supposed to do in America. All right, and the distance of actual knowledge is so far from where those elitist folks really live that sometimes breaking it down, looking at a map and saying, what's life really like in Washington State? And what do the people in Washington, D.C. know about Washington State, if anything at all? Like, for example, the smudge on the screen down there that's Hawaii. Not trying to be disrespectful, but let's talk about Hawaii. I mean, have you seen in your lifetime how much Hawaii has changed? I mean, if Hawaii had a vote right now to secede from the Union, I think it'd be hands down they'd do so.
Really?
Because America's just not leftist enough for Hawaii.
And they're the newest state.
Yeah. Their side that they're here, they're so taken over by their tribal identities and their politics and their uniqueness that they've second-guessed whether they should have done this in the first place. And they have every right to that opinion. And if they vote to secede, I'm all for it. You don't have to stay. Nobody has to stay. Truth be told. And if you're staying because you don't want to stay, we say, well, are you calling for civil war? Heck no. That was a big mistake in the first place. We didn't have to have a civil war. Those states that wanted to be slave states, they could have left. They should have left. And you know what all the rest of us should have done? Freed the slaves anyways. And then helped them leave. We could have saved about 700,000 lives right there.
There were slave states that stayed in the Union, that they could have freed the slaves in those slave states that fought for the United States against the Confederacy. Don't forget that there were 4 of those states.
And in case you're thinking that this is some kind of a harebrained idea, who the heck is this guy? And if he was anybody important, he'd be on Fox News or CNN. Yeah, no, we get those invitations. They bore us. Okay? All right? We don't do that for a reason. But let's just think about it this way. Forget the credentials, which, by the way, if you'd like, we could take some time on credentials because I think we're okay there. All right? But let's just talk about common sense for a second. The reality is this. How did we end slavery in this country? Well, Civil War. No. We ended slavery in this country by the United States Congress passing the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, which then were ratified by the states. That's how we ended slavery in this country. Am I missing something?
If we hadn't done that, then at the end of the Civil War, all of the slaves that had been freed, and I'm using air quotes, legally would have gone back to their slave owners because they were contraband. We had to pass the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, or the Civil War would have been for nothing.
To end slavery required constitutional amendments, and it required that from 1787 going forward. They knew there was unfinished business, and they started in a 30-year fashion to work their way out of it. Ultimately, they knew they had to. The problem was they waited too long. Human corruption is what it is. We live in a fallen world of the second the second principle of thermodynamics. All right, everything that gets hot gets cold.
Mm-hmm.
Everything that stands up falls down. We live in a fallen world. And in that fallen world, you give people enough time to profit from slavery, they will do so. So we missed the best windows of opportunity. We had a civil war, but we came back full circle to the fact that it had to be addressed in our Congress with congressional actions, with amendments being passed and then ratified where? In the states, which, by the way, tribute to Illinois, the land of Lincoln, because he laid down his life for this very conversation. So, what does the map tell us? It tells us, how did Colorado go red to blue?
They went Denver. Red. They didn't go red to blue, Dave. They went red to purple, then to blue. It was a baby step process.
Good point.
Look at Denver and look at Boulder, Colorado, and you've got your answer.
Well, and the solution to that is vigilance. You have to keep your eye on the ball.
But the people of Colorado have the government that they want. That's what they vote for.
Right.
All right, so how did they get persuaded to go from conservative to liberal? Is this a test case? Is this a microcosm of reality?
You have an influx of people from other states that had a liberal mindset or a leftist mindset, and they went to Denver and they went to Boulder and to some other areas. And by the way, I've actually been there many times, and I've seen what liberal leftist government does in Denver with their homeless encampments all over the place. My life was actually in danger on one occasion. I could tell you many stories about it.
I'm sorry, Jeff. The answer is, this is like a game of Jeopardy or the old McLaughlin report on NPR. The answer is John Denver and legalize marijuana. Next state. Let's move to...
Sounds like Jeopardy.
Let's move to New Mexico. No. All those points are valid, aren't they? These things take time. They take generations. What's interesting, a lot of Christian people moved to Colorado Springs. A lot of Christian organizations headquartered there.
Yep. Yeah, but I could quote a bumper sticker to you that wasn't exactly friendly when they moved into town. So
I remember that.
Ignorance is bliss, Wayne. We don't need to know.
Yeah, right. TMI.
This whole conversation is making me think. Have you guys seen Gavin Newsom's new career pivot? Have you guys? He started a podcast. It's just very interesting. The first few guests that he had on, he had Charlie Kirk on, and he had Steve Bannon on. And it's just very interesting that he's a very liberal left-wing governor that looks like he's trying to set himself up for a run as some sort of a moderate, and he's doing it through YouTube podcasting. I'm sure it's on all the other platforms as well, but it's like you see them kind of trying to steal the playbook that looked like it worked in the last election cycle.
Well, podcasts cannot fix policies that are wrong. I mean, podcasts are podcasts. You're going to hear the policies discussed. So you just have to be discerning with what you hear.
Sure. Well, it just seems like it's a maneuver to position oneself for electoral advantage, perhaps.
Yep. Well, and all right, I'm not even going to touch that because that's too many P words in one segment for me. I'm just going to let that go. Just in case you're wondering, I still consider this to be a radio broadcast that's heard on almost 300 stations. Right. All right, and also is available online. Let's land the plane. Here's the moral of the story. And this comes back to being so ultimately trite that I'm going to ruin the whole coloring book right here. It's been said ad infinitum, and 18 people have probably taken credit for the original source. Politics is local. All politics is local. Presidential elections, in the end, come down to whether the people like or dislike the candidates. And the size and shape and tenor of civil government is more dominated by what happens inside those state boundaries than what happens in that little place called the District of Columbia. And that's reality that doesn't change. So maybe it would help if we look at the map a little differently.
We will pause there for this week's edition of The Public Square. Thank you for your support. Thank you for listening to what turned out to be a very lively conversation here today, and I trust a helpful one for you. You can always contact us through our website, thepublicsquare.com. For Dave and Melanie and Jeff and Alan, I'm Wade Shepard. Thanks for listening to The Public Square.
Public Square is a broadcast service of the American Policy Roundtable.